Like in most things in life, the cheapest way is not always the best way. We work with owners and managers that have come in after the fact and unfortunately are paying the repercussions from someone that has done the cheapest thing and not the best thing for the property, and now it's costing them long term.
So maybe duct tape and spray foam is not always the best solution?
No, not usually.
I've seen that. I've been in properties where that was the solution.
Welcome to the Rental Property Owner and Real Estate Investor Podcast, brought to you by the Rental Property Owner Association, providing benefits and services to real estate investors and rental property owners for over 48 years. With your host, Brian Hamrick from Hamrick Investment Group.
This episode is sponsored by Green Property Management, managing everything from single-family homes to apartment complexes in the West Michigan area. Find out more at greenpropertymgt.com. And RCB and Associates, helping real estate investors and small business owners navigate the complex world of health insurance and Medicare benefits at rcbassociatesllc.com. Hello and welcome to episode 166. Hiring contractors, handling maintenance issues, and dealing with city inspections are a reality of owning residential rental property. The level of efficiency and quality employed in handling these issues can either add huge value or create huge problems for your investment properties. It can be helpful to understand the best practices employed by the professionals in our industry to make sure we're following the rules and not wasting money. And having this conversation with me today are two experts in their field. Amanda Sabo is a general manager at Lease GR, a West Michigan property management company that has been in business for over 15 years. Tom Harold is the manager of rental property maintenance, or RPM, a West Michigan company that handles maintenance, repairs, and rehabs for landlords and property managers in the Grand Rapids area. Tom, Amanda, thanks a lot for being on the show today.
Thanks for having us.
I always like the nuts and bolts conversations of how do you actually do things? How do you work with the city? How do you pick vendors? And I want to go there. But Amanda, I do want to get to know you guys a little bit more. So Amanda, tell us a little bit about you and your company.
Okay. I have been with Lease GR for about 8 years now. Over that time, we have grown the portfolio to be anywhere from like 360 to 400 units that we manage. We also do lease-up onlys for about 500 properties where the owners just decide to manage it after we find them a tenant. We handle all different areas of the property management as far as finding tenants, working with the tenants, working with owners, and helping with maintenance issues.
All right, so you've seen and done it all. Mm-hmm. Tom, what about you?
Well, I've been with rental property maintenance for going on 5 years now. The company itself has been doing work in the city of Grand Rapids rental properties for close to 10 years. And we do lots of handyman and full rehab city inspections for a half dozen or so managers in town and looking to grow.
Let's say I have a property and I've been managing it myself and I'm somewhat handy and I've been doing all the maintenance on it myself. But then my full-time job gets busy and I've got to find someone to step in and help me. And I've got tenants who are upset because there's some plumbing leaks. The city is going to do an inspection or they've done an inspection and they've given me a list of things that need to be taken care of. And I just don't have time to deal with it. What do I do, Amanda?
Well, you call a property management company and we would, come out, go over things with you, see what your house needs, see what you need as the owner. And we would work with our vendors to get things taken care of in the home and make the city happy.
Okay. And your vendors sometimes
is RPM.
RPM is a vendor that you use.
Yes.
And you also have other vendors that you can use.
That's correct.
And is that one of the great things about a property management company is they either have people in-house who can do it or they know who to call?
I think it's a great benefit because if you're just the single homeowner, the time it's going to take you to get someone scheduled to get that work done is going to be a much longer time frame than what a property management company can offer you.
By the way, I don't manage my own properties. I'm not handy, so I would never do any of the work. But that's always been one of my reasons for having property management company, just the turn time. If you have a unit that's vacant and I'm going to get over there on the weekends to turn it, I might as well just pay someone to do it as quickly as possible. That way I can get someone in there paying
You're
rent.
not losing the money.
And how often does sometimes you run into issues?
You're going to run into issues from here to there. You'll have a tenant that maybe doesn't return a phone call to a vendor they report a maintenance issue and then they're not returning the call to get it scheduled. You have the time where during the, really busy season where your vendors might be, a little bit busier. You just have to schedule that between the two.
Yeah. So part of it is just scheduling, getting your tenant to say, okay, I'll be here to let the person in at this time.
Yes.
And then making sure your vendor's ready at that time, which is something I'd much rather have you do than try to figure out myself. Tom, tell me about it from your perspective. When your company goes in, rental property maintenance, RPM, and does work, from the vendor's perspective, what is it like to work with the property manager, the landlord, and the tenant?
At RPM, we prefer to work with property managers and seasoned landlords because they've been around and they kind of know the process. They know what they're doing. They know that sometimes getting into a property can be a struggle, but we try to alleviate a lot of that. We try to act as an outlet for both parties. If they call us, we're used to going in and scheduling with the resident. We'll hand it off to individual technicians, assign it. They will bird dog getting access themselves. They'll place the phone calls to not have to try to lean on the manager in that situation or a landlord, as long as we have contact info, and then gain access with the tenant's permission and on their schedule, so we make sure that it gets done. Our process is if we're called for a general handyman work order, we'll call one time. If we don't get an answer, we'll leave a voicemail. If they don't call us back in a day, we try to call again the next day. If we don't get a call again, then we ask the management company their process on their lease, because we know that we're working in rental properties.
So wait, stop right there. So I know it seems like we're getting bogged down on just the logistics of actually scheduling time to get into a property, but how much time in reality is spent doing those logistics of getting someone into a property and working with everyone's schedule versus the actual amount of time it takes to do the repair or the work?
Sometimes it takes longer to schedule and do the paperwork than it does to do the actual repair. And our thought is, why would a landlord or a manager want to take that time out of their day to do that when they have things to do, like collect rent or get to their day job? If you're a landlord, we can offload a lot of that responsibility and take care of that ourselves. It does take quite some time. Sometimes a resident will request, and within an hour we'll give a call back, and they put the request in but still don't call us back. It's fun from time to time. But then we'll ask the property manager their process from there. Usually we'll post a door and gain entry. Usually most managers have something in the lease that says you have legal access within a certain time frame of notification. So
okay, so how do we make this process more efficient? Well, do you guys have any systems, any apps or anything that tenants can use to schedule?
I do feel that the app that we use when a tenant submits a maintenance request, they can check that they have given us permission to enter. If that is on
so
there.
they can just give you carte blanche. Come on in anytime?
Exactly. Yep.
Can they also say, hey, come in between these hours on these days?
They can. That is not just a check of a button, that they would have to fill in that information. But that makes it easier because we can just let the vendor know, hey, you can come get a key from us, or however they've granted us access, and that makes it easier. It does not work that way all the time, though.
It doesn't, unfortunately. Especially from the vendor perspective, you don't always want to enter somebody's home, even if they might have given permission 8 months ago, access to their property at any given time. They might have a brother that's there that day and doesn't know what access their sister
gave.
Wait,
you mean you can't just walk in?
No, unfortunately.
Are there laws or something to prevent you from doing that?
I would have to ask the manager that scenario. We just do it from a safety perspective. We don't want to walk into an angry dog or angry brother-in-law that's sleeping over for the weekend or something like that.
Have you ever done that?
Oh, there's been some times where people weren't aware the maintenance professional was coming, even when we got permission on the phone earlier in the day. It happens. So it can be a dangerous situation. We want to make sure our guys are prepared. So they will try to gain access. We always make sure that an adult is home. There's never minors home alone, because that happens all the time. You don't want to be put in a risky situation. So we try to schedule with the resident that's on the lease to try to be home so we can make the repair happen at the time. If it's an emergency, if there's a leak or something, then we take care of the property. Again, if there's minors home, we get the manager involved in that scenario. But other than that, if there's an emergency, we would pretty much go in, and luckily we haven't had any problems so far of just taking care of. Usually a major emergency, somebody's home, like a toilet overflowing or something, is there's no gas problem or something like that.
We finally get into the property after months of phone calls back and forth and emails, and the problem is just getting worse and worse. Once you're in there, then what?
Well, when we make the repair, we try to operate within spend limits. We ask all of our management companies to give us a spend limit, because I don't think that anybody wants to operate with a blank check. If they expect a leaky faucet costs $100, we ask them to put that on there, so at least it's a point of conversation if we think it exceeds that price. So if it's not a leaky faucet, and it turns out that the faucet needs to be replaced because there's cracked supply line in the housing of the faucet or something like that, we would call the manager and ask for permission to go over. We don't always get a response.
I'd like to take a moment to tell you about Green Property Management. Not only do they manage everything from single-family homes to apartment complexes in the West Michigan area, they also manage my entire portfolio. So I can tell you from personal experience that their unique flat fee management style is worth a closer look. If you feel that your property isn't operating to its fullest potential, then Green Property Management can help you take a holistic approach that will save you money, eliminate your headaches, and increase your net income. And if you're a property manager interested in applying Green Property Management's model, give them a call at 1-866-95-GREEN or visit them on the web at greenpropertymgt.com.
What about when you show up to make a repair? Say it's a leaky faucet, but then you notice a much bigger problem. And it's one of those things where the closer you look, the more you realize, oh, wow, this is going to be very expensive. Does that happen?
It does. And when that
Give me an example.
So the leaky faucet can turn into black mold in the basement. I mean, if gone unnoticed and unchecked for who knows how long, because there's residents that are afraid to go into their own basement. We see that all the time.
Residents afraid to go in their basement?
Yes. Yeah.
Why?
They call it a dungeon,
killers
dark,
down
dingy.
there
It happens more frequently than you would think. So
we have some creepy basements here in Grand Rapids, that's for sure.
So as a vendor, we try to be the eyes on the property in that moment. We're in the unit at that point. The manager might not have been able to make that happen. So we're there. We try to report back on more than just the faucet leaking if possible. So
what do? You go to fix a leaky faucet, then you go down the basement and you see black mold.
Sure.
And you call Amanda. What do you say?
We try to call Amanda and have a price ready. So we say there was a leaky faucet. We take some pictures. Here's what's really going on. Bottom of the cabinet's rotted out. Under the cabinet, there's mold. It's going to cost X amount of dollars, $400, $500 to make the cabinet repair. Maybe a mold remediation professional needs to get involved. Maybe we can handle that in-house. It depends on the level of mold in that scenario or remediation that would have to go on. And then she has information to give back to her owner in that moment, what it would take, what it costs, with pictures, hopefully detailed in an estimate, what it would take to get that problem resolved. And we also try to stop the problem from happening in that moment. So we try to keep the leak from continuing and causing it to get worse.
So Amanda, you get that phone call from Tom. Mm-hmm. And what questions do you ask, and what do you do from there?
Well, I first make sure that the leak has been, taken care of in the moment. And then the nice part is usually the quotes or the bids come with photos. So it's easy. A lot of our owners still want to be very involved, and they want to have the final say, and they want to know what's going on with their properties. So to be able to provide that to them and have the photos, it helps them feel like they get to make a real educated decision. So that makes my job easier in that moment.
So in working with your clients, your property owners, photos go a long way toward telling
Certainly.
the story. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So what else? So do you try to get approval right away?
Oh,
because
yes.
Tom's already there?
I feel
sometimes you can't get everyone on the phone. So, I mean, how do you handle that?
Well, he would have approval, to take care of the situation, to make sure the leak has stopped. And then, to schedule everybody beyond that, we would be able to get that done in a real timely manner, because you want to get it taken care of for the tenants. So usually most of our owners are pretty responsive.
What do you do if an owner says, well, I don't care about the black mold in the bathroom. I only want to spend $100 on the faucet?
Well, that's not really an option. We're not going to let that stay in a house.
How do you have a conversation with an owner where you say, look, you're going to have to spend a lot more than you anticipated, and you have to do it? How do you have that conversation? Well,
I mean, it comes down to how we represent our rental properties, and we cannot represent a home that has black mold in it. That's just, so it's a decision that has to be made of what kind of landlord you're going to be at that point. And so, if they want, we'll get another quote, to see if there's a competitive bid out there, but it will have to be taken care of because we've placed those tenants in there, and that house needs to be in good living conditions.
Have you ever had an owner say, nope, I'm not going to pay for it?
No, not that I recall.
So they listen to you and they say, oh, okay, I don't like it, but I'll do it.
I've worked with managers where this has happened.
Okay.
So I'm not going to name drop any manager who it happened to and who had to deal with it, but I think that I've heard that, because we'll follow up on our estimates too. So in a scenario where there might be black mold, or just to go along with this example, we might say in a week, hey, we haven't heard from you. Do you need any other information from me? Do you have any questions? Is there anything else we can do? Do you want us to try to get other bids? Because we work with gathering other bids from vendors in-house as well. And sometimes, one time I've gotten a response saying, no, the owner doesn't have the funds to take care of it, and they're letting the resident out of their lease. And because some managers will have other places for them to move, they'll help facilitate and that moving, maybe they'll lease another place for free or something like that until that owner can manage the situation how they intend to.
That's an indication that owner needs to sell their property to someone who can't afford to take care of the problem. If you're letting a tenant go because you can't afford to fix the problem, then you got some serious issues.
Yes. Yeah. Well, we try to look at it from the mentality of, as the vendor, we do our best to try to think of everyone's needs. Everyone's needs. The tenant is living there. It's their home. They're paying for it. The place where they live as their home. The owner, obviously, it's their asset, their property. And then the manager is involved because they're the middleman in all of this, or the middle person. And we look at it as, let's propose what we think the property needs. We're hired to take care of the property, to repair the property. What does the property need? And in that situation, it generally takes care of all parties as long as someone can afford it.
I would imagine when you go into a home and there's a resident there, you start to hear a lot of stories about what's wrong with the property. Does that ever happen to you?
All the time.
If you are thinking of leaving your W-2 job and becoming a full-time real estate investor, one of the greatest costs you must consider is healthcare for you and your family. When I made this transition 5 years ago, I found the whole healthcare insurance process to be confusing and frustrating. That's why I'm glad I met Chad Creasy at RCB and Associates. Chad is a professional healthcare insurance agent who helps real estate investors and small business owners understand and choose their best healthcare options. And best of all, his services are covered by the insurance company and won't cost you a dime. If you are expecting a change in your healthcare insurance coverage for any reason, or losing employer coverage or transitioning into Medicare, then you owe it to yourself to contact Chad Creasy at rcbassociatesllc.com.
So how do you kind of manage that? Because that takes up your time. You've got a job to do. You definitely want to give recommendations as to what needs to be fixed, but you're also hearing a lot from the resident too, some of which may be exaggerated, some of which may be true. How do you deal with residents when you're actually in their home fixing things?
Luckily, from the maintenance perspective, from what I hear from all my in-house techs that are out there doing the work, and I've been a tech myself, so I can attest to this, most of the time the residents are ecstatic to see maintenance. They're fixing a problem that they reported. So very rarely do they get angry with the maintenance professional themselves, but you do hear those things. You do hear, well, we've been saying this for months, or various stories, or we told the previous manager this. We hear that a lot. The previous management company knew about this. So the way we deal with it is we tell the resident to make sure that their current property manager knows this, or to talk with their property manager about things that get fixed. And if they approve it, we can come back and fix it. But we will also try to report back the same complaints ourselves in our documentation. So we'll make the repair, especially if it's a handyman work order or something like that, where we're only expected to spend $150, $200. We'll replace the broken door. And then if someone's complaining about their ceiling tiles that have been stained for 2 years, we'll put in that recommendation in our description of work. We'll say, while we were there, the resident recommended this, and we'll try to provide a fixed number too. So it would cost this much money to fix these additional things if you want us to go back. Or if we have a close relationship with the manager, we can call them and say, hey, Lucy said these things are also wrong. Do you want me to check this out? I still have some money left in the spend limit. And then you handle a couple things at once, kills a few birds with one stone. And
so you try to be efficient when you're in a residence home. Okay, so Amanda, you're managing a property and it's time for a city inspection. Mm-hmm. Talk us through that process, because a lot of people, I would imagine city inspections happen in a lot of communities. But I also know there are communities where they don't have city inspections or city rental certifications.
There certainly still are those communities, but the city of Grand Rapids is the one that we have the majority of our properties, and that we will have the most property inspections. And so we get that notice, and we will go to Tom, and he will call the city and get it scheduled, make the contact with the tenants, get that all set up, and then you can kind of take it from here, because then he does this part and then turns it over to us.
Sure. So we work with a lot of different managers, but speaking with Lease GR specifically, since Amanda's here, like she said, when Lease GR gets the notice from the city of Grand Rapids, she'll forward that on to me. I will queue up a few of them so that I'm contacting the city once, try to be as efficient as possible. There's deadlines on it. I'm aware of the deadlines to make sure that we're not crossing any expiration date of a current certification or anything like that. And then once I get a few spooled up, I will contact the city either via email or...
So, and you're contacting the city to say, hey, let's schedule for your city inspector to come over and walk through the property with us.
Correct.
Are you doing anything before that? Because you know what the city inspector is looking for. So do you go into the property beforehand and do a pre-inspection to make sure things are taken care of?
Yes and no. I would argue that the best way to work with the city is to not have to work with the city at all, which means be proactive in making those repairs that the city is going to look for. And if you have a vendor that's in a particular municipality that has inspections, they should be pretty aware. If they're working on rental property, they should be pretty aware of the repairs that are going to be necessary come city inspection time. Pre-inspections don't always work out, because although we know the code and we know it very well, when we go and we're hired to do a pre-inspection, we are looking at it with absolute detail, with everything that the city requires, but every inspector has a different set of eyes, even though everyone's reading the same code book. And they might look at the general condition of a property, think it's it's pretty well overall, and they will maybe scale back what they're looking for an inspection from this inspection, or they'll trust the vendor in some scenarios to take care of the items that are there because they have a good reputation, and not ding it for as many items. So rather than go through with a pre-inspection and spend thousands and thousands of dollars making it sure it's absolutely bulletproof from a city inspection standpoint, we suggest doing the majority of the big items that the city would be looking for to make sure that the property is in good condition when you're prepping the unit, or when you're
prepping the unit. You mean when you're turning it?
Correct.
A resident.
Yeah.
So in between turns.
Correct.
Take care of the big things then.
Have a city inspection eye while getting it ready for, because this is the intention of the city inspection anyways, is to make sure it's in a livable, safe condition for a resident to live in. So why wouldn't you have that approach while turning it and prepping it for a new resident to come in anyways? And then if you know those things are done, we work with some managers that will make sure that we have all the city inspection stuff that we think is important at the time of turn. And if something comes damaged between now and the city inspection, it then becomes a tenant damage issue as well, because this item was taken care of. So we think the best way is to make sure that the city comes in, and they might still find something. A smoke detector might have been going off the night before the city inspection, and take down the smoke detector, or they needed a 9-volt battery for their remote, so they took a lithium-ion battery out and they put it in their remote control for their TV. things happen all the time. So to be 100% prepared for the city inspection is almost impossible, but you can take safeguards against that before going in.
Talk us through the city inspection process, because you basically schedule, they come out, they walk through the unit or units, depending on how many units are in the building. And what are they typically looking for?
Oh, there's a whole list of items, but they do have, I think, a 12 or 20 point list or something like that on their website if anyone was curious, and different municipalities have different locations for that. Generally, the most important things that we see are going to be smoke detectors, holes in walls. I mean, these are very common items. Making sure there's enough outlets in a particular room, making sure the square footage in every bedroom is accurate. Window pinning was a big thing for a little while because the city of Grand Rapids particularly went through a single family home inspection program, which didn't happen before. Was it 2014? I think it was before my time in Grand Rapids, so I'm not 100% certain of the start date. But
it was around 2014.
I think that was it. And a bunch of people were getting hit with having window pinning. And for those that don't know what that is, the city of Grand Rapids requires that any openable window within 6 foot of ground level is required to have a night lock or a safety guard or a window pin, which is a device that allows the window to open 4 to 6 inches and be pinned or locked in that position so that somebody from the outside can't come through, take the screen off, and open the window without having some issue. I believe I was told one time it was put in by the police department. It was asked to be put in by the police department so that they had evidence of breaking an entry if someone did enter a unit, so they weren't just opening a window and sliding in.
So they're looking for every window that opens like that to be pinned.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you got to go through, and we have old houses here. So
Yeah.
that's a lot of pins.
It is a lot of pins, and there was a long time where you couldn't get the stock. We were ordering almost a year worth of window pin stock ahead of time just to make sure we had it, because the stores locally would be sold out because it was a big thing for a little while. The houses never required it before, and now all of a sudden every single family home that was rented to a resident in Grand Rapids was required to have them. So it took a while to get property managers to understand why and to explain to their owners why they were necessary, but now they're all in place for the most part, unless a new single family becomes a new rental for the first time. So now it's a matter of making sure that those items are still there.
What are some of the other things on the checklist?
Mechanical inspections.
Yes. Yeah. Mechanical inspections would have to be performed by a licensed HVAC technician.
So yeah, how often?
Every 4 years.
So every 4 years, that's the tag or the sticker that's on the unit. You have a licensed contractor come in and look at your HVAC. Just the HVAC or the water heater too, or like what all mechanicals?
I believe it's any heating or appliance. I'm not 100% sure how it's defined, but it's both the furnace and the water heater. So it's a gas or electric, actually, both. So it would be the furnace and the water heater have to be inspected by an HVAC professional every 4 years, and that's just to make sure that the combustion is safe and it's not emitting carbon monoxide into the home. The heat exchanger is not cracked on the furnace and stuff like that.
Yeah, Amanda, how much do city inspections typically cost a landlord?
Well, the city cost is around $260 just for the city's cost on it. And then depending on the home, I would say you're going to average somewhere around between $500 to $1,000.
On top of the city, just in the repairs. So $500 to $1,000 in improvements or repairs in order to get it to pass the inspection.
Exactly.
After the inspector comes through. And then the inspector comes back through, right, to make sure that you did what they said?
Yes. Yep. They come back through for the reinspection.
And do they charge again for that?
The $260 is the total.
$260 is the inspection and then the reinspection. What happens if they come back and they're not happy with what they see?
There's another inspection fee on top of that. So the city of Grand Rapids specifically, different municipalities have different deadlines. Kentwood and Wyoming, I believe, are both on a 30-day schedule. Kentwood has recently changed a number of their rules in regards to code compliance, and they're not 100% clear yet. Wyoming is 30 days from initial inspection. City of Grand Rapids has a sort of a leniency program, I would call it. They give you 2 weeks of verbal orders, which means the inspector on site will say, I'll give you 2 weeks to take care of these items. If you take care of it within 2 weeks, I don't have to file a notice of violation, which comes with its own additional fee, and starts a process where they have months to get these failed items in compliance. So they will have 2 weeks to come back and re-inspect, and that's why you generally want to keep your properties in good shape. I'm going to inflate the number a little bit that Amanda just threw out there, saying repairs would be anywhere from 500 to 1,000. I think we see a few more. It's great because Lease GR has well-maintained units, which is a really good sign as a management company, but there are others, especially first-time landlord recently that is getting into this business that will buy a property. They think they're getting a great deal at $100,000 for a duplex, and it's going to cost $20,000 to get up to in compliance.
Okay, so yeah, I wanted to get there because you have a lot of people from out of town coming into Grand Rapids, buying rental property, and not being aware of this rental certification and the Grand Rapids codes and inspection program. So, Amanda, talk about that a little bit. How often do you get calls from new owners, who are upset because they find out about this?
I would say most of our owners are pretty well educated that this is part of the process. And a lot of our homes, they are up to date, and they have been inspected. And they're going on their second round of a certification. So I don't think we have a lot of surprises with new owners. Thankfully, they're pretty well educated that this is going to be part of the process of being a property manager, and owning rental homes.
Now, but it sounds like, Tom, you've had experiences with owners who find out, well, they've got $20,000 worth of repairs to make. Talk about their state of mind and when they talk to you.
Well, some of them are completely okay with it because they understand that they got the property undervalued. They know it's been deferred maintenance for decades. It had a poor landlord beforehand, possibly. So some of them are completely okay with it. Other ones are completely shocked. They expected a return the same year that they purchased
They thought they were buying a turnkey property.
Yep.
And now it's they got to put $20,000 into it.
Right.
There goes 5 years worth of profit.
Yes. Mm-hmm. But luckily, if they look at the asset, usually if they got it at $100,000 in today's market, $20,000 is still not going to bring it up to market value. So they would still be getting a deal from it, in my perspective. Yes, there's a big chunk that they probably weren't expecting, and maybe they didn't have a loan that covered that $20,000. So there's some out-of-pocket expense that they weren't expecting. But the big ticket items that would hit in that scenario would be exterior scraping and painting or siding of a home, because wood surfaces have to be free of flaking or peeling paint in the city of Grand Rapids, and that has to be performed by a EPA certified, RRP certified repair technician.
Yeah, you can't just go scrape the flaking paint off your house and repaint it, right?
No.
What is the city worried about?
Lead poisoning for everybody, but children mainly.
Big issue, lead poisoning. And since the majority of houses that you find in downtown Grand Rapids are 100 years old, they're all susceptible to having lead paint.
Yes.
Yeah. So talk about that, the cost of that a little bit.
So the cost of scraping and painting itself is not too bad. It's going to be no different than any full house repaint would be, but you can't use power tools, power wash a house, use mechanical applied sanders to scrape the paint from a home. It has to be done by hand when you're dealing with lead. And then you have to build containment barriers, and there's a testing process that happens afterwards.
Because you're trying to contain the dust that's kicked up.
Correct.
Yeah.
And if they're close to each other, it becomes even more impossible. Shouldn't say impossible. It's not. We do it. You have to build up scaffolding between homes if they're closer than 10 feet to each other, because you have to put a 10-foot barrier. Luckily, Grand Rapids homes are pretty far spread apart, so we don't run into that issue often. But you have to have a 10-foot containment barrier outside if you're going to scrape a house. We often say it's more expensive up front, but probably cheaper long term to just side the home.
If you can. If you're not in a historic district.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yes, very true.
Yeah. So, yeah, I had that situation. I've told this story before, but I had a 4-unit on Franklin and Prospect, and got dinged by the city, peeling paint. peeling paint. So you got to take care of it. And of course, they give you 2 to 4 weeks to do it, but it would have been a $10,000 job. Well, I didn't have $10,000 to just put into painting the 4 unit at the time. And I also just looked at it, well, is it better to just side it? Luckily, it was not in a historic area. It was just outside. So I was able to put the siding up, but it took a couple extra months. Well, that couple extra months cost me a couple extra $1,000 with the city because they didn't have the patience to allow me to figure out, well, what was I going to do and where was I going to come up with the money? So I talk about that a little bit because, often the city gives you a couple weeks. What happens if it's so expensive or time consuming that you can't get it done in a couple weeks?
Oh, we'll make the suggestion if we know that it's a multi-stage, multi-week, multi-month job in some instances to make decisions, get financing together, whatever the case may be. We'll know pretty close. We'll know fairly immediately whether this should be a notice of violation situation or a 2-week verbal. But we will still always request a 2-week verbal up front because we've worked miracles before. We'll try to do it again to get things done quickly as long as we have approval and funding to do so. And the other thing is communication with the city goes a long way. We have a really good relationship with a lot of the inspectors. They know we get the work done if given approval. So we'll talk to the inspector directly, say, hey, we received approval. We have this item on order. We have all these things. We provide paperwork and proof that these things, that as long as the owner and the people doing the job are working towards the goal of getting it completed, a lot of times they will give you extensions without fees, or they will hold off if it gets really far down the path. A notice of violation will go to a warning of prosecution, which is a misdemeanor offense. And they'll hold off on all of those as long as they have progress being made and communication happening. So communication is key in those instances. But we'll try to make a suggestion up front on what we think that the property will take to get back in order, what time frame and what to take from the city. And that way, if you're upfront with the city, they're generally pretty good about being, they'll work with you rather than against you. They want the problem handled ultimately. They're just people that work at the city. So.
Yeah. I think in my case, just for requesting an extension, they charged us $500.
Oh, no.
Even though this was 10 years ago.
Sure.
But even though we actually got it done in time, we had asked for an extension. And for doing that, we got a $500 bill. So it can be quite expensive getting city certification. Mm-hmm. Talk about how often do they come out to inspect? Is it every year? What is a typical inspection period?
It depends. Do you want to?
Well, it depends on the municipality. Mm-hmm. I mean, it should be every 4 years you get a cert, and then after that you can get a longer certification.
Yeah, sure.
A longer certification for how many years?
It depends on the items they find.
So I may get some of the details wrong. I don't have the list in front of me, but in Wyoming, it's a 2-year cycle. And I believe they started a few years ago that you can pay for a longer cycle. You can go to a 4-year if you have under 2 units at a property. If it's over 2, it's an every 2-year cycle, no matter what. Something to that effect. It depends on the number of units in their municipality. In Grand Rapids, a first time when a property changes hands to a new owner, the certification, I believe, defaults to a 4-year cert. The first time through a property defaults to a 4-year. I think they've retained the right to shorten that to a 2-year cert if the property is just in terrible condition and they have a really bad experience when getting the property up to compliance the first time. But generally, the first time through, it defaults to a 4-year cert. And then after that 4-year cert is up, the second time through, depending on how much they catch that second time, what level of infractions you're hitting, how many different variations of those infractions. So if you have peeling paint on a windowsill in the bedroom and also in the bathroom, that's one infraction. It's still just peeling paint on wood surfaces. But if you have peeling paint and a smoke detector, that's 2 infractions. So if you hit multiple infractions and you cross a threshold, it can prohibit you from getting a 6-year certification. But if it kept in good condition and no problems with the city, no complaints to the city within that 4 years, they will issue a 6-year certification.
I'd like to point out, with the 6-year certification, that's something that the Rental Property Owners Association helped negotiate with the City of Grand Rapids.
Oh, great.
So that did not exist until the Rental Property Owners Association actually started having dialogue with the city to get that.
And then conversely, the other way, if it's held in horrible condition from 4 years, it can go to 2. But I have never seen a 2-year cert issued, thankfully, in our experience. So I don't know who is getting 2-year certifications or if they just hold that out there as a potential threat to those that aren't doing their job. But there is that potential that a property can go from a 4 to a 2.
Is that applied to both single family and multifamily properties?
I believe so. I'm not 100% certain on the single family part. I'd have to look at that list. There's a lot of little idiosyncrasies that I have to look up from time to time. Having the 6-year cert is a great thing. So it's amazing that the RPOA was able to negotiate that. However, I would suggest to anyone listening that even though you have a 6-year certification, that shouldn't provide the leeway to not see your property for 6 years, because that's a pretty certain recipe for disaster and ending up with a 4-year cert next time. So during that 6 years, if you don't see your property, get in there, do annual inspections, or during a filter change, take a look at the rest of the property, make sure that things are still up to compliance for the most part, and make general repairs so you stay on that 6 cert cycle going forward.
So Amanda, let's say one of your owners wants to do a bigger project. They want to rehab a bathroom, a kitchen, that kind of thing. How do you work with them and vendors to make that happen?
We would just get the vendors that are needed for the job, have them go out there, obtain bids for them. We have owners from out of state that will send us suggestions of what they want the bathroom to look like, with photos and different ideas. We'll go through that and get them the pricing, and then hire the vendors that are going to complete the job that they're looking to have done.
And working with, knowing who the vendors are that you should call, maybe sometimes having multiple vendors, how do you manage that process?
Well, we have this, a small list of vendors that we are real comfortable with, that can take care of, nearly anything in a home. And we'll, contact them, see what their time frame is, and if they're interested in it, have them go look at it and get that information to the owner.
Tom, it sounds like your company definitely does a lot of the maintenance and repairs. Do you also do larger rehab jobs?
We do. We've done a few single-family home full renovations for sale. So people are realizing that we're nearing the top of the market, or are already there, and are looking to cash out of their investment. And they're asking us to, when a property becomes vacant, to go through, get a comprehensive list of what it would take to make a home look like a starter home or a first-time home buyer would be interested in, something they might see on HGTV, and get it ready within, depending on their level of work, within a month or 2, and get it on the market for them.
So Amanda, tell me just your process when it comes to choosing what vendor you're going to work with, or what handyman you're going to call to do a job.
I have to say, probably our portfolio of vendors that we work with now has come from good reputations. They've been referred to us from other property managers or owners. We've gotten to see, the kind of work that they do, and so we've learned to trust them and use them on our jobs. You have that time where you give a new vendor a try, and sometimes you end up only using them that one time.
What's a sign that you've picked the wrong vendor or the wrong handyman?
Poor communication. I think in this business, the number one thing you need is communication. And if they can't provide that, it's going to look bad for you as the property manager in the end.
And what constitutes poor communication?
Not returning phone calls, not getting back in touch with tenants, not staying on time for their scheduled appointments.
So just
because then that ultimately
unreliable and undependable.
Exactly, because that's going to come back to us as a complaint, and it looks bad on us, and we want to have happy tenants. So,
Tom, does your company then hire other vendors? Subcontract, maybe bring in 1099 maintenance and handyman kind of people?
We do. We have a number of guys in house, and we also subcontract for overflow because we try to be a good employer too. So we don't want to, during our busy season, hire an additional guy and then slow down and not be able to keep that guy going. So we try to keep one guy, trustworthy 1099 guys for overflow. And then we will also subcontract a number of items, some of the bigger jobs, roofs, sidings, things like that. And licensed professionals, plumbers, HVAC technicians, electricians will 1099 all those items as well. And we spend a lot of time trying to curate people that are good communicators, as Amanda said. And two other things I think are important. Well, the work is very important as well. It's becoming very hard to find skilled labor in general across all trades. So, and all of our 1099 companies that we deal with have that problem. We have that problem in house finding them. So when we find them, we try to hold on to them. But the two things on top of the actual skilled work that we want to make sure is getting done is the communication, people that are able to leverage technology, because although communication is important, I can't handle 400 phone calls a day. So I need email communication primarily, working through software primarily, and then phone calls in urgent scenarios so that I know that if you're calling me, it's important for my vendors, the ones that I work with. And the other item that is very important in our world, I think, is vendors that are capable of dealing with rental properties a lot. So that also know how to work with gaining access with tenant occupied property and not homeowner occupied property, because you have some handymen out there that are great at working at condo associations and single family homes, and they show up and they're working directly with an owner that they're billing and they can ask for permission. But I need people out there that are able to understand that the person that's in that home cannot give you approval to do everything that is in that home, and know to communicate back to the person that actually hired them, which would be me in the scenario or Amanda in her scenario. So that is important, is to find people that are capable of thinking beyond what's just in front of them. And it's becoming hard. There's a lot of people out there that are not licensed that are doing work that might be able to work a lot cheaper than us. We're not the cheapest outfit in town, but we're not the most expensive either. And we've come in after them. Sometimes they do great work and they're able to do it cheap. I don't know if they're EPA certified. I don't know what's going to happen if something goes wrong on a property. But if you have your landlord and you can continue using that person, that's amazing. We need people that are fully licensed and are able to do things and trustworthy to go in there, that have skin in the game, something to lose if something goes wrong, essentially. There's the labor market we're seeing is creeping up towards $75 for handyman rates, which we're not even close to approaching, but we see that all the time for licensed outfits. And that shows you what $25 an hour is not getting you. I don't know how anyone can hire a 1099 professional for 20 to 25 anymore, but amazing if you can keep it going.
Yeah, it's a real competition to find good, skilled labor. Mm-hmm. Do either of you have any horror stories, when it comes to working with contractors, vendors?
Well, I can share of a most recent. We had a city inspection that the house had to be painted. The inspector that did the initial one was no longer with the city for the reinspection, so we got a new inspector, and they flagged a garage. So we thought we were done. The owner thought he was done, and then we had to then go and tell him, I'm sorry, but now we have to go ahead and paint the garage now too. So that was a tough one to deliver that news.
The city can come back on the reinspection and find more if they decide to?
So we've been through a few of these scenarios before, so I can speak to that. You'll have one inspector, if it goes to an NOV especially, a notice of violation, where it's documented that in the code it says you have surfaces that have peeling paint and flaking paint. The next inspector that comes in can lean directly on that NOV, that notice of violation, and say, it says right here that there are surfaces with scraping and peeling paint, even if the original inspector with his or her eyes looked at it and said, take care of that fascia, take care of that deck, and we're good here. The garage isn't too bad. But if the owner sometimes needs to get funding together, maybe they're dragging their feet, maybe not, maybe a certain manager will be dragging their feet on approval for whatever reason because they're busy. Not sure the scenario, but if approval takes a few months to happen, and then the garage or something that had minimal peeling paint gets worse in that change of seasons or something like that, they have every right to go back and say this is appealing too.
And have you ever fought the city, disagreed with them, and said, no, you're wrong, we're going to fight you?
We have. We have. I wouldn't call it a fight. We try to work with the city. We think the best way to work with the city is with working with the city. We just try to lean on our documentation. We have photos of all the items. We will do our best to call on our relationships at the city. We know usually it's a straight trajectory up in the code compliance department. So if you have a code compliance officer 3, they're called, they're the sort of the bottom tier or the general tier of code compliance officers. If a position comes up for code compliance 2, they'll open up that opportunity to the code compliance 3 officers, so they'll move up. So the people that we've worked with in the field are now bosses in the office, and sometimes we can call at that boss and say, hey, we're not sure what's going on here. So-and-so came out, and then so-and-so came out, and we know that wasn't that way before. Turn out? Usually pretty well. I mean, there's usually something that has to be done. We want all parties to be happy. It might have required a full scrape and paint, but we'll say, hey, if we can knock down the bad stuff and get it another cert, can we move on from here because this wasn't anticipated before? Sometimes it doesn't work at all. And sometimes we eat that cost because it was our fault.
Right. But it helps to have a personal relationship. Like, you might know who to call.
Yes.
That does make a difference.
It does.
Having a face and a name and a pre-established relationship with someone who might be in the inspection department. Mm-hmm. So I want to wrap it up here, but I want each of you to just sort of pull together what we've been talking about and give your best advice to our listeners when it comes to hiring vendors, working with the city, and we're doing these types of repairs and improvements to a property. And I want to start with you, Amanda. I mean, what's your advice to our listeners when it comes to all of this?
I think the best thing is to make sure that you have someone that's educated and a good property manager to make sure that it's taken care of. And then as far as the city inspections, I'm working with a homeowner now that he thought he had it under control, and he was trusting his tenants to take care of what the city had said was wrong with the house. And he got an NOV, and now a notice of violation. And now he's turned it over to me and is expecting a miracle by the end of this month. So if you're a homeowner, I think you maybe need to look at what is required of your property for the city and be ahead of the game on that instead of trying to play catch up.
I would say, like in most things in life, the cheapest way is not always the best way. And we work with owners and managers that have come in after the fact to no fault of their own, but have come in and unfortunately are paying the repercussions from someone that has done the cheapest thing and not the best thing for the property. And now it's costing them long term. If you try to think a little bit further out than what gets us through this one repair, generally it's going to be better for all parties. It might cost a little bit more up front, but generally we'll provide a happier tenant, a better place to live, a little bit of pride in the property. It will probably be a more robust repair. You'll probably be a little bit happier with the property, and if you can swing it, I think that's the better way to go.
So maybe duct tape and spray foam is not always the best solution?
No, not usually.
I've seen that. I've been in properties where that was the solution that the owner had. So let's make sure our listeners know how to get in touch with you guys. Tell us once again your company and how people would get in touch with you, Amanda.
Sure. The company is Lease GR, and you can get in touch with us a couple different ways. You can reach us by phone at 616-257-3997. You can check our website at leasegr.com, and email, you can reach me at sabo, SZABO, at leasegr.
And once again, you're basically a property management company.
Exactly, yes.
So if someone's looking for property management in the West Michigan area, they could call you.
We would be happy to help them.
Great. And Tom, tell us how people would get a hold of you.
If you're a property manager in the greater Grand Rapids area or a landlord with a number of units that you'd like to have under control, maybe 12 plus units, maybe even a little less, you can check our website at rpm616.com. It's under construction, but the contact page is live. or you can email me at tharold, THARROLD at rpm616.com.
And I'll make sure both of those all of that is in the show notes too. Well, Tom and Amanda, I want to thank you for sharing your boots on the ground perspective of just working with vendors, handymen, working with the city to do inspections, the inspection certification process or the city certification process. I mean, there's a lot to take into account when you own rental property. And I think this conversation has gone a long way to sharing, some of the realities of that. So thank you very much for being here, and it's been a pleasure talking with you guys.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
This episode was sponsored by Green Property Management, managing everything from single-family homes to apartment complexes in the West Michigan area. Find out more at greenpropertymgt.com. And RCB and Associates, helping real estate investors and small business owners navigate the complex world of health insurance and Medicare benefits at rcbassociatesllc.com.
You've been listening to the Rental Property Owner and Real Estate Investor Podcast, brought to you by the Rental Property Owner Association. You can find out more at rpoaonline.org. If you enjoyed this podcast, please go to iTunes to subscribe, rate, and review.